Welcome to the PopCult podcast. Here are your hosts Ariana and Seth.
I'm Death Harris.
I'm Ariana.
Don't you have like a pun for your name?
Yeah, you did not warn
This is
me.
this is the PopCult podcast Halloween Spooktacular. Ooh.
You're gonna keep going for the next 5 minutes. Just
Oh, brains. What?
Nothing. I just don't know who you are right now.
I'm the millennial Michael Winslow, you could call me. Do you know who that is?
The guy that made all those noises in the like Cop Academy or Police Academy.
Oh my god. I ate that guy who made all those noises in Cop Academy. That sounds like that was like the straight to video knockoff of Police Academy. That was like shot on porn set in the valley or something. Cop Academy. And he didn't make the noises. He was a comedian, is a comedian who specializes in sound comedy. But anyway, a little later, we will be doing some retro reviews. We're going to be talking about the 90s films. I think they both came out the same year, 93.
Okay.
Hocus Pocus and Addams Family Values.
Mm-hmm.
But first, because it's the special, we like to throw some extra stuff in there. You had never seen it. I rewatched it. Tales from the Far Side. Based on the comic, I won't say comic strip because it was always one panel, so that's not really a strip, but the sort of comic pages feature of The Far Side by Gary Larson. Mm-hmm. This was a comic that I can remember seeking out the comic section of the newspaper to specifically read.
Yeah. Didn't we watch a documentary about him, or was like a mockumentary?
We watched a mockumentary about him. That was on Documentary Now. Dear Mr. Larson, because it was making fun of Dear Mr. Watterson, the Calvin and Hobbes documentary.
That it was a joke that he was like super. Like,
it is like Gary Larson doesn't do a lot of public appearances, I don't think anymore. And but like The Far Side was a big part of my childhood. There were many Christmases where people in my family didn't know what to get me, so I'd get like a Far Side collection paperback. And so I remember like reading through those a lot and enjoying them. This originally aired it was October, I have the exact date. It was October 26th, 1994 on CBS. And was the first time that The Far Side had ever been presented in animated form. There was a sequel made that has never aired on American television. Okay. It aired in Canada, and it was on the BBC. Because it was popular enough, I think, overseas that it got that. And then I think it got like a VHS release, so there was like a big enough fan following in other places. So it is it a horror anthology?
No.
Then what would you call it? Because it does not have a plot that goes from the beginning all the way to the end.
I guess you would call it a horror anthology.
And it's more gags.
Yes.
I would say it is very similar to the comic strip in that it is very bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
What were your general thoughts seeing Tales from the Far Side for the first time?
I thought it was okay. It wasn't something that was super engaging. There was at some point where narration was involved in 2 clips, which was kind of confusing because it almost felt as if they didn't trust the audience to know what was going on.
I'm gonna push back on that in a second.
And I almost wish that those were either the last ones or the first ones.
The comic Far Side did always have text at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it was dialogue that a character was saying, or it was a description or explanation for what was going on that kind of sold the joke.
Yeah.
So I think in that instance, it kind of works. I found that I think it translated well to animation.
Yeah.
It felt like The Far Side. It didn't feel like they had to remake it or anything. The zombie cow or the Frankenstein cow, Bride of Cowenstein, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought like that was a funny little thing. The insects in the airplane.
I think my favorite was like the wolf watching videos.
Oh, and his partner eventually, like the bear trap where they're like dancing over it, and you just know what's coming. There was
because then they show up in like the Frankenstein sheep.
yeah. Yeah, so there's like connective tissue between some of the jokes. There was one segment, and I was like, I don't know if that's racist because the tag on the end of it, like, kind of recreates what we saw with a different group of people. So I'm like, and they're also talking gibberish, and they're obviously not like indigenous.
Yeah.
And there was like people in the Amazon, and he's telling a story about encountering a man with a giant head.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the joke is supposed to be like headhunters or something.
Yeah.
And so like to them, somebody with a giant head's like mythical or whatever. That one I didn't really work for me. What did you think of the overturned semi truck one and the reveal at the end?
It was just silly. It was good, but it was silly.
Are there any Halloween TV specials you remember from your childhood? Because it's one that there are specials, but I don't think they get as much talk as the Christmas stuff.
I don't really recall many of them.
Your family really didn't celebrate holidays or experience joy or
we went trick-or-treating up until like I was 8 years old, and then we moved back to Puerto Rico, and my grandmother was super Catholic and was like, trick-or-treat is from the devil, so I never trick-or-treated after that.
I never trick-or-treated in my entire life.
Yeah, because it's from the devil.
My mom instead would take chick tracts, those little like comics that are like horrible, where they're like, you're gonna go to hell if you do this, and tape suckers to them, and we would hand those out when trick-or-treaters would come by.
Did trick-or-treaters come by?
Not at the house where you know of.
Yeah.
But when we lived in Williamson County or Rutherford County, we lived in a neighborhood that did get several like decent amount of trick-or-treaters. That was the only time in my life I ever experienced like trick-or-treating.
Wow, your mom's a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they were terrible.
Just like, don't fucking celebrate it. Why have to fucking have the candy with the lesson?
Christian fundamentalists think that by imposing their views on you, it's gonna make Jesus happy, and he's gonna like upgrade them to like heaven plus when they die. I guess I don't know. But yeah, the Tales from the Far Side. I thought it was fun. I was 13 years old when it came out, and I remember it was like I just loved the idea of this, like the Far Side, because at that point, from the upbringing I had, that was about like some of the edgiest comedy I'd ever experienced.
Yeah.
What is a comic strip that you think should get an animated adaptation that hasn't yet?
See, I would say Calvin and Hobbes, but I also understand the maker does not want that because of the way I think it's like he's almost anti-capitalist in the way that his
I think the only time he's ever licensed it officially was to a math textbook.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Which is like understandable. He's just like, I don't want it to be so, because then like it goes bigger than you, and then afterwards when you die, like when he dies.
Well, when he dies, yeah, it's over. They're gonna sell that shit off like crazy.
Or is just giving strict instructions to his family. Yeah, I can't think of any.
I mean, I was gonna say Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah.
Just because I think in the right hands and done with the right respect to the material, it could be like one of the best comic to animated adaptations ever made.
Yeah, but it's also so hard to trust anybody with anything.
Well, that's the thing, is it couldn't be like any of your big animation studios.
No, it'd have to be like the people who did like Robot Dreams or so.
Yeah, something like that. I would almost like a European animation house, or partner with Studio Ghibli, because like they did the Red Turtle.
Yeah.
Which I think was like a Dutch animated film that we saw a few years ago, which I didn't think was that great, but I thought the animation was incredible.
Yeah.
And I think someone like that, someone who doesn't have the sort of merchandise oriented view of animation that they do in the United States, Because if it's animated in the United States, they want to put it on backpacks and shirts and all kinds of shit.
They want to do a 5 to 10 year like business plan of what they're gonna sell you.
And so I think like Calvin and Hobbes, it just and my big thing I would not want there to be an overarching narrative. It would just need to be the kind of loose, silly imagination stuff of Calvin. And I think that's something, if you did an American version of that, there'd have to be some big arc where they're like saving something or
it's like, oh, Calvin has to move, but it would be weird because it's like the way he's set up. I think
well, like you'd lose Susie, you'd lose Miss Wormwood, his teacher. I'm surprised that I remember the names of all these people.
Yeah, I think it would probably just be more about like maybe a new person, an adult being like, what is up with his imaginary friend thing? And then it being like a celebration of that, but still.
You just little vignettes. Yeah. That's what I want, little vignettes. So the other short horror experience we had was we watched a short film that came out this year from Japanese director Kiyoshi Kurosawa, who, if you are a J-horror fan, you're already going to know his name. But for those of you who may not know a lot about J-horror, that's what we call Japanese horror. Kurosawa directed the film Pulse, which was remade a few years later in the U.S. horribly. Kristen Bell, I think, was in it. But the original Pulse is really good. It's about the sort of alienating nature of the internet and modern media.
Yeah.
And he made another film, Cure, which I have not seen, but we will be watching in December, just for the blog. Because in December, I decided what I'm going to do is it's a gift to myself. And it's 3 weeks of just movies that I don't really want to figure out a whole series to put them in. I just want to watch them because I've heard they're really good. And Cure is his highest rated movie, one of the highest rated Japanese horror movies I've seen like online. I'm looking forward to that a lot. It stars the main actor from Wim Wenders' Perfect Days.
Okay.
So he's like a detective in it or something. But Chime is very interesting because it's a 44-minute short that Kurosawa put out, which is interesting because oftentimes feature-length directors don't go back to short films. No. So I thought that was interesting. It is a film that has a very kind of hard plot to describe because very little happens. It's more just there's a mood and a tone that just keeps building. Mm-hmm. And then there are things that happen, but what I love is it's not a jump scare horror movie.
No.
This is a horror movie that is just about dread. Like that's the most overwhelming emotion you feel while watching it. There is a man who's working as a teacher at a school. I don't think it's a culinary school. I just think it's kind of an all-purpose, like adult learning kind of school. And his specialty is he teaches cooking. Mm-hmm. And one of the students in his class, a young man, starts behaving very strangely, saying weird things, standing and just kind of staring off. And at some point he mentions how if the teacher hears the chime and that he thinks that it means something is coming for him.
Yeah.
And then later he goes into this crazy rant about there's a machine in his head and all of this. Well, the way Kurosawa's horror works is it's all very existential. And so I saw someone describe it as ambient horror, where it's just kind of present in the space. And it's not a thing. It's not a person. It's just a sinking feeling in your gut that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And suddenly there's an event that happens with that student that kind of is the catalyst for everything else. And it leads to our protagonist here, the chef, starting to have these weird, what's the opposite of lucid? Because lucid means you're like very aware of what's going on.
Delusional?
I'm going to say lucid antonym. I want to know what a lucid antonym is. I don't think those are great words. But he's disassociation.
Yeah.
Where his entire like personality changes, or he'll be doing an act and then suddenly like his student kind of stare off and you're not really sure what he's staring at. And then he'll just kind of snap back, but he won't even acknowledge that anything's really happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to see it happening to other people around him. And that it never like just people smiling in ways that they shouldn't, or people's actions being repetitive in a way that starts to feel unsettling.
Yeah.
Tell me what you thought of Chime.
I think Chime really reflects the current state of the world when it comes to this dread that we just can't seem to escape.
That
So
something's wrong.
yeah, so there's like this interesting way of the lighting. So at some point when his very strange, bizarre student starts speaking, lights start flashing, and it's supposed to be indication, oh, like a train is passing through.
But it's the timing of it is very specific.
And then it looks as if like his shadow is coming in and out, in and out, in and out.
And
like
you keep anticipating another shadow, but there's never another shadow.
no, and then like I tried to like almost study the way the room was positioned. So you're just kind of confused in how the lighting got there exactly the way it was portrayed. And then later on, this is past the half point of the film when the teacher is kind of like walking away, having been distraught, having seen something that we don't even get to see from his point of view. We just get to see his reaction. There's this lighting of like he's standing in front of a door and it's supposed to be like he's in the garage area, and the way the lighting is, it's supposed to be, it's either a frosted window that people are walking about, but it almost looks like spirits or shadows being cast away and like leaving him or like going closer.
It feels like he's standing in front of like a membrane to somewhere else.
Yes. And it is just this way of taking advantage of what's around and the elements to just make it feel like it's off.
Well, you're talking about lighting. There's a scene in his house with the beaded doorway.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like the way the light is on it. It almost made me think there was like a person standing on the other side of the beads.
Yeah.
But there's no one there. And then the final shot, which saying wasn't the final shot, won't give anything away. It's just we see light coming out of that door, and the way the music is signaling to us, it gives me the sense of like you're just like, oh no. But I love the way that I can't articulate what it is I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
It's just something's wrong.
Like
something's not right.
Dread.
Yeah.
It is, and it feels a lot like the dread of existence. It feels
It was existential horror.
Yeah, because it also has to do like it's worse than like the Monday scaries, as people call it, when you're like feeling anxious for the next day.
Because at least Monday will end.
Yeah.
This is like you just made a realization about the world, and it's something that you can't change about the world. And you're like, now I have to live the rest of my life knowing this horrible thing about the truth of the world we live in.
Yeah. And like there is no escape from it, especially with like the protagonist. We're seeing his mental health or like this knowledge of himself almost deteriorate, especially through the interviews that we're seeing him go through.
But let's talk about those interviews. So one of the subplots, which for 44 minutes, they pack a lot into this movie.
Yeah.
And yet it feels like there's not anything extra. So the chef is going through a series of interviews with, I guess it's a manager of a restaurant that's about to open.
It's already open.
Because it's the place they're in where he's going okay. I wasn't sure if they were just interviewing in that place or if that was actually the restaurant. And it's going fine, but the interviewer brings up the fact that he is an instructor. And the chef is like, oh, I'll give that up if I get this job.
And like, but you said that you would never give.
No, he said you said it was something that you found a lot of honor in.
Like, yeah, I'm pride of doing. And
yeah.
He's like, then he stops and he's like, I don't know why I said that.
And so we see, I think it's 3 interviews.
I think 2 interviews. We're indicated that there was an interview beforehand.
And the last interview is just such a unsettling, uncomfortable, embarrassing thing to have to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the actor Mutsuo Yoshioka, who played the chef, is so incredible at switching
Yes.
from someone who's lucid and aware to someone who it's like, where did this personality come from? Is this a totally different identity? Like, who is this guy?
Especially because of how calm he seems when he's in the classroom giving instruction and the way he interacts with everyone else. And then suddenly you see a completely different person emerge who isn't able to hold accountable of like his own actions or what he has said, or is able to control himself at the end.
And what I think Kurosawa's work is about, and I think that'll kind of be confirmed when we finally watch Cure, is the horror of humanity. Because so far the two things I've seen, it's not about monsters, it's not about ghosts, it's about an underlying wrongness in the societies that we live in.
Yeah.
And so one of the notes I wrote down is people so often behave impulsively and irrationally, and that's what makes humans scarier to me than any other animal. Because if I'm around a bear or a shark, my life is certainly in danger, but I can predict and understand the actions of that animal. If I'm around a human, I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And you could give me 10 humans, and I don't know what any of them will do. I could get 10 different results from interacting with them. But if I interact with a grizzly bear, there's a pretty good chance I know what's going to happen with that grizzly bear. And I think that's one of the things where, and I don't often care for horror that is about humans, like slasher stuff doesn't appeal to me.
No.
This does, because there's people doing things that otherwise you would never suspect they would do.
It's also this knowledge of the way that you're watching the main character. He then knows how to behave in front of the detective.
So he's like faking things.
How to behave when the administration comes in and is like telling him information about certain students. Like, he knows what the reaction should be versus when the reaction of everything else, like the interview, it's sort of like he's at a loss because it's almost like he doesn't know where his place is. And then, like, there's no sense of disappointment when he fucks up the interview.
Well, it's like you don't even know if he understands that what he did.
It is just more that he has completely lost his sense of self. But understands how he should behave towards people he already has encountered multiple times.
Well, I was going to say the importance of camera movement in this movie. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of static shots, but then there's these moments where like the camera moves, especially in the classroom and the sort of teaching kitchen.
Yeah.
Where things will be revealed. But once again, nothing's ever a jump scare. If something's revealed to you, it's intended to scare you.
Yeah.
It's not a cat jumping out and making a lot of noise. And yeah, watching this made me, because I thought Pulse was okay. I didn't fall in love with it as strongly as a lot of other people have. This movie I thought was fantastic, and it's got me very excited to watch Cure in December. So if you follow the blog, keep an eye out for that review coming in a couple months. I think it's going to be a really fun thing to watch. Well, coming up next, they're ooky, they're spooky, and they're our next review. Join us after the break for our review of Addams Family Values. The members of the Odd Addams family are up to more macabre antics in this sequel. This time around, Gomez and his wife Morticia are celebrating the arrival of a baby boy. I don't know about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But siblings Wednesday and Pugsley are none too happy about the new addition and try their best to eliminate the infant. When Nanny Debbie Jelinski appears to keep the kids in line, her presence leads to an unexpected treacherous twist. This is Addams Family Values, the sequel to the hit film The Addams Family, which saw almost the entire cast reuniting. They did change out the actress who played Grandmama with Carol Kane. But otherwise, everything is the same. So, Ariana, I know this is a film we both saw as children. I think you have a lot of strong feelings about this movie from your childhood.
Yes.
So tell me, what was it like to revisit Addams Family Values?
I mean, between this film and the next one that we're going to be discussing, I feel like it made me understand my bisexuality a little bit more.
Huh?
Like Joan Cusack in her like dresses.
Okay.
Um, also just I remember as a kid watching Raul Julia and my mom telling me he was Puerto Rican. And so in my mind, if I ever had this image of who I wanted my dad to be, I would imagine it was him.
Ariana!
It's like
Did you cry when you heard that he died?
I almost cried. I didn't like fully cry. I mean,
Did you stand up and salute when you watched Street Fighter the
it was
movie?
very confusing.
Because I know your brother made you watch Street Fighter the movie.
Yeah, it was also very confusing because he died like right after that film. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it still holds up to some parts. There are still weak parts in this film.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into all the details of that.
Yeah.
I would say I'm right there with you. It's a movie I went into with expectations of, oh yeah, I loved that movie when I was a kid. But now as an adult, because I understand like story structure and the way like a plot can flow and how you can notice in a movie when they're trying to patch over things or they're just injecting elements to make certain plot elements happen.
Yeah.
I think you can kind of see that here. It's a very scattered movie at a certain point.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that works 100%. But as you said, the best part of this movie is Raul Julia.
Yeah.
The greatest Gomez Addams we've ever had. There's no one that's ever going to top him. So many funny lines and like line deliveries. There's certain lines that just on paper don't sound like that funny, but when he injects his tone into it, I loved children. Why do you hate the baby?
Like so understanding and also like kind of like in a jovial voice.
What's so calm?
Yes.
After they've like tried to butcher this baby. One of my favorite scenes is when they're at the police department because he's trying to report that his brother has been kidnapped. And it's a surprise cameo from Nathan Lane as the cop at the desk.
Yeah.
And as Gomez explains it, you are like, yeah, this doesn't sound like his brother's in danger. He's like, my brother has been married. And he's like, okay. And he went, and they went to Hawaii for the honeymoon. And now they live in a mansion. And he's like,
and they make love continuously.
Constantly. But then it's his response when the officer is just like, I don't know what to tell. Like, I can't help you. And I wrote down, it goes, has the planet gone mad? My brother is passion's hostage. And it's just so good. Like, this is like a franchise movie, right? And you could see an actor going, I'm not going to take it that seriously. It's just a nice fat paycheck. And I'll just, I'm not necessarily going to phone it in, but I'm not going to really commit. Raul Julia fucking commits to this. He's not the only actor. We'll talk about someone else who does too. But Raul Julia it is all cylinders as him.
Because I always remember the first film when he's watching Sally
Jesse Raphael.
And like I always like
the topic of her episode is something about like
cultist and like spiritualists and
or it's something about something bad happening.
Yeah, and how they commune with the devil.
Yeah. And she goes, no, Mr. Addams, I will not give you their phone numbers. But then it's because it's on when you think about it from Gomez's point of view, he does not know the extent of what Debbie's doing. All he knows is that his brother Fester got married and lives somewhere else now. But he's acting
and doesn't want to see him.
But what I loved is whenever he becomes bedridden and he's laying in the bed and he just starts singing, swing low, sweet chariot. And then when Fester does show up and he just stares off into space and he goes, Fester? Fester, where are you, Fester? Yeah. And then he goes, no, Fester. You are not Fester. You are Mr. Debbie. And so it's just, if there's any reason to go back and rewatch this movie, it's just to see Raul Julia deliver these lines. And it makes me so fucking sad that he died
Yeah.
not long after, because you think about all of the potential roles that he could have played going forward. It's just so sad. The other actor that as a kid, I never really cared for this character, but as an adult, I think this actor does a better job in the sequel than they did in the first movie, even though they're a big part of the first movie.
Yeah.
And that is Christopher Lloyd as Uncle Fester.
Yeah.
He plays him as such a disgusting goon.
Yeah.
Because he's gross and he's stupid.
Yeah.
And he does it so well. Like, I don't know how to articulate it better than that. It's just he and it was one of those, as a kid, I don't think I picked up on the subtlety of it. And that's also Joan Cusack's performance too with him, is she is disgusted by him from the moment she meets him, but she's able to fake it enough that and he's dumb enough that she convinces him she wants to marry him. But there's just like, it's these little like reactions of repulsion that she's like holding back, I think are just so well done. And he is, the outfit that he gets when he gets remade by Debbie, the page boy haircut wig, and then the white suits with shoulder pads. And I think it's Christopher Lloyd. You can just tell he is really into the physicality of this role.
Yeah.
And it's so funny this coming years after, Back to the Future, where we see him as Doc Brown. So we think of him as this like old man, right?
Yeah.
Which he really wasn't. And he's very like limber in this role.
Yeah.
Like his movements, he's all over the place. And just so grotesque. I love that about him. What did you think of Wednesday and Pugsley? Because as a kid, the summer camp stuff, I was like, I love the summer camp stuff. As an adult, I'm not so sure.
I think it's a little weak. It's like they needed to get the kids out of the way. I mean, here's the thing. Like, the Addams do their best at times, especially the kids, when they're stuck amongst normies, right?
Yes.
And I think it just was, there was really some good stuff, but at the same time, it just didn't seem as packed full as it did when I was a child.
Yeah.
I think it needed a little bit more finesse in the writing, because there's just like, kids are gone, are like, they met, like Debbie convinces the parents, being like, they're gonna say no, they're gonna say they don't want to do it.
Let's talk about the structure here.
Yeah.
So we open with the birth of Pubert.
Yeah.
Who in this description it says he's a boy, but in the movie someone asks, "Is it a boy? Is it a girl?" And Gomez goes, "It's an Addams." And the kid's name is Pubert. They do use he/him pronouns.
Yeah.
But I just found that very interesting, that like how they choose to, and I guess the gag is like, well, the Addams are not like anybody else, kind of a thing. Having the baby brings out animosity from the older children.
Yeah.
Which requires hiring a nanny. Mm-hmm. And the only nanny they can find that can make any headway is Debbie, played by Joan Cusack.
Yeah.
Debbie is a con artist, a black widow who has a trail of dead husbands behind her. And as a result, she has already researched the Addams, and she's going to try to marry Uncle Fester so she can get his portion of the Addams fortune.
Yeah.
The kids are onto her, so she has to get rid of them and sends them off to summer camp. Then she and Fester get married.
Yeah.
But then the kids come back from camp to attend the wedding.
Yeah.
And then go back to camp to continue that subplot, because they still need them out of the way so that Debbie can hatch her scheme.
Yeah, like there needed to be something in between of like the kids trying to stop the wedding or interrupt or making an interruption, only to be sent back as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I think it was, we need the kids out of the way so that Fester can get duped, but we also need the kids here because it wouldn't make sense for them not to be at their uncle's wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's where some of the weak stuff comes in. And the summer camp stuff feels like a lot of just kind of, and I mean, you could say that about a lot of the Addams Family. It just feels kind of like little one-note gags.
Yeah, there's like some like really funny moments. The part that made me laugh a lot was when they're stuck inside a cabin that has all the stuffed animals and they're gonna be forced to watch like Disney films.
Annie and all this stuff. Yeah.
And
Oh, is this where he gets his book snatched?
yeah.
So it's David Krumholtz as the Joel.
As Joel being like, "Why are you in here?" He's like, "I just wanted to read."
And then it's
the
Peter.
rest is like they had left. He's like, "I just want to read." That's
And then Peter McNichol, who is also one of the best parts of the movie, opens the door and goes, "Fat chance, bookworm!" and then like snatches the book out of his hand. It's so good. Like Peter McNichol, who is I would say he's an underrated character actor. I want to see him in more stuff. He he's done a lot of drama, but I think comedy is where he shines.
I mean, like the viciousness him and
In
Veep.
Veep. That's what I was thinking of. But then also like what was the character in Ghostbusters
Oh
2?
yeah, like
He has such a specific name. I want to say Milos, but I know it's not Milos. I'm looking it up because that's like I love that character. Ghostbusters 2 sucks, but Janos Poha. And he is the only good thing in Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah.
And he is the one thing that makes the summer camp stuff still strong as an adult for me.
Yeah.
Is just the acidity of that character where it's this fun, and I didn't notice this as a kid. I picked up on it now that it's a summer camp for privileged children specifically. And so he goes from like really peppy and cheery to just venomous towards the Addams kids.
Yeah.
Because they won't play along. He's partnered with Christine Baranski, who also does a very good job. So yeah, the summer camp stuff, I would have put that through a few more rewrites.
Yeah, it's a little weak because especially like towards the end, they're just like, "Oh, here are all the other reject kids that also don't get along in summer camp that you kind of wish that they'd also made an alliance with to explain how they managed to like escape or do as much chaos as they did."
Well, and this is a case where the movie's 134 minutes, and I would not have minded another half hour.
Yeah.
Just to give a few things a bit more breathing room.
Just like 15, 10 minutes.
I would have done 30. I think more Raul Julia. I'm not gonna say no to that.
But like it's also this interesting thing that in the film, it was also acknowledging like, okay, Christina Ricci is a little bit older, so we're gonna have her do awkward flirting, which actually does work with the character because I did love like the first time she sees Joel, she starts to like
well, it's like she's clearly feeling something, but she's disturbed by it.
She's like batting her eyelashes, but is confused. Or how like Joel tells her like, "Oh, I'm allergic to everything, like everything could kill me," and she scoots closer to him. It's like they're like, "Oh, Christina Ricci's gonna be a thing, so let's really make her the highlight," while also just kind of throwing Pugsy to the side.
Pugsley, yeah. Well, I mean, Pugsley in these movies was always like a tertiary character. He was I don't think that child actor was that great.
No.
He's fine. He just needs to be there. Yeah. It is like when it comes to the Addams kids, this is the Christina Ricci show.
Yeah. It's the inspiration as to why now we have Wednesday.
Do you find that they were beginning to sexualize Wednesday more in this movie than they had in the first one?
In what way?
They dress her a bit like Morticia at the wedding. And then I could like on the poster for the movie, she's wearing an outfit that's like a young girl's version of a Morticia dress.
Yeah, I was kind of confused because I remember as a kid, like, and I'm not sure if I'm mixing up with the first film, like, that she danced at the wedding, but it's like, I don't know if, like, we just maybe it was a more memory of mine.
Well, I think, like, the Wednesday character is very interesting because out of all the Addams Family characters, I think she's the only one that has been allowed to grow throughout the material.
Yeah.
Because you think about the original series, she was like a little girl, like 7 or 8. In these movies, we let her go into her like preteen years.
Yeah.
Then with the Wednesday series, we're now like in high school.
Yeah.
No other Addams character has like aged in that way. And also they've kept the Addams franchise. Like it's still a franchise that I guess is making money. They've done, I think it was like DreamWorks Animation or maybe Warner Animation. They've done those with like Oscar Isaac is the voice of Gomez.
Yeah.
And I think like Finn Wolfhard is the voice of Pugsley or something.
What was that child actress that was in?
Chloe Moretz
Yeah,
does
yeah.
Wednesday, yeah. And then of course there's the Jenna Ortega series that Tim Burton makes. And I just haven't felt compelled to watch any of that stuff
No.
because it just feels like it doesn't have the humor that these movies had.
I think it's just not that. I think it's just these films were childhood things.
Yeah, there's a
And
nostalgia
it
there.
was
for
also
sure.
like it wasn't a franchise that makes me go, ooh, I want to see what it is that like someone younger in my generation is gonna pick up on that I haven't. It's not so beloved that I would be really mad if they did a shakeup or change. The one thing I just do respect is like now people are just like the Addams family is like a half Latino family, so fuck it.
Which I mean, it always was, even back to like the Charles Addams
Yeah.
comics in the New Yorker. And then like having the only time that Gomez wasn't Latino was the TV series, John
Yeah.
Astin. Every other instance of the Addams family, he's a Latino man.
Yeah.
What do you think of Joan Cusack? Because we haven't talked about Debbie in much detail.
Is like a fucking delight. The whole my one of my favorite scenes beyond just like her really holding back her disgust or her like being like what a bizarre setting is when they're having the exposition of who she is and it's on TV. It's like this newscaster being like this horrible woman and she is eating chocolate and reacting. Just being like faking being like shocked about certain things when it's just her being more amused about her past crimes and then also just knowing that she's going to continue it. um my favorite bit is her having to explain to the Addams family why she is the way she is.
Malibu Barbie. I remembered that when I was a kid.
Morticia gets like some digs in, which I really loved. I
I think Angelica Houston does Morticia as like quippy very well.
and I love like the lighting that they always have one streak of light over her
It's
eyes.
so overly dramatic.
It's one of my favorite things because like before Fester is like, oh, I don't want to see you guys anymore. She's like how Morticia's like, I can forgive the deceit. I can forgive you taking like Fester away from us. I can forgive like so many things. But Debbie, pastels.
Mhm.
And then like when Debbie explains about the Malibu Barbie, she's like nodding her head and there's a tear in her eye.
Oh, and then I love Debbie's like, I didn't want Malibu Barbie. I wanted ballerina Barbie. I am a ballerina.
I am
Graceful. And I love she goes, so they had to go. And then she hits the slide and it cuts to a house in flames. And so yeah, every justification Debbie has for why she killed someone is so weak that it just becomes comical.
Totally accepting. They're just sort
Well, and Joan Cusack was like the perfect person to cast as an antagonist to the Addams family, I think.
yes. Because she's just like the character herself, you almost want to question, like, how could a quote unquote normal person fall for her when she's so obvious? And that the Addams family was kind of like, no, we're fine that you're a serial killer. In fact, we're okay that you killed all your husbands. We're not okay with you, the fact that the two things that you separated Fester from us and that you don't love him. Like those are their major points again. Everything else, they're like, oh yeah, no, like a serial killer. We have a ton of them in our families. That's just like it's part of the deal.
Well, so this film was made by Barry Sonnenfeld, who is still making movies. He started out as a cinematographer. He did the cinematography for early Coen Brothers movies, I believe. I know Blood Simple, Raising Arizona, and Miller's Crossing are all him behind the camera. He also did Throw Mama from the Train.
Okay.
Big.
Okay.
When Harry Met Sally,
Okay.
and Misery.
All right.
And that's just his cinematography. So he stopped being a cinematographer in 1990. And then in 91, The Addams Family came out. So I think it was one of those where if you were going to make an Addams Family movie and you think of those movies,
Yeah.
he's going to bring a very unique visual, and you do need it to be kind of cartoonish if you're doing an Addams Family movie. His career post Addams Family is not one that gets me too excited. He made the Men in Black movies, which I have never enjoyed. I know there's people that love Men in Black. I don't think there's that many, but there are people that do, and I just didn't like them. He made Wild Wild West, which I know won a bunch of Golden Raspberries, and he won Worst Director. He and then it was after Wild Wild West. You kind of see his career is scattered. There's gaps. He did a lot of He did Men in Black, Men in Black 2, Men in Black 3. And the only time he produced was the most recent one, Men in Black International, which I think was a flop. That was the one with Hemsworth and what's her face, Valkyrie from Thor Ragnarok, Tessa Thompson.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't watch it, and I just everything I saw about it. First of all, I don't like Men in Black, and then I'm like, okay, you're just gonna reboot Men in Black with different actors who don't excite me that much anyway. There's no reason for me to watch it.
No.
And so I think he's starting to get more into the producing side, though he did direct 9 Lives, which we have not seen, the movie in which Kevin Spacey dies and is reincarnated as a cat. I haven't seen it, but I have seen the Ralph the Movie Maker review.
Yeah, no, we don't need to quote it.
Yeah, and it's so good. There's a line in that review that is excellent. But yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld kind of Addams Family, I think, was kind of the perfect thing for him. And so the fact that he didn't stick with it, I know in 98, they made I think it was a Fox Family or ABC Family, Addams Family reunion with like Tim Curry as Gomez. That is the other time Gomez was not Latino. And everything I've ever seen of it, it looks like a cheap fucking TV production.
Yeah, there's just some stuff that's just, whew.
So I would say that Addams Family Values probably is one of the better movie sequels.
Yeah.
A lot of movie sequels kind of fall flat or just kind of repeat the formula. This, I think we watched The Addams Family last year. We watched it. This doesn't feel like it's retreading that. It feels like it is introducing new elements. The only place where you could say, oh, it is kind of retreading is that Fester becomes this kind of figure upon which the plot revolves.
Yeah.
But I think and it is Fester it's the reverse. He's being taken away from the family rather than being returned. But I think Raul Julia and Christopher Lloyd's performances are just so like full throttle in this movie.
Yeah.
It makes it where I would go back and rewatch it again, I think. After moving to Salem, Massachusetts, teenager Max Dennison explores an abandoned house with his sister Danny and their new friend Allison. After dismissing a story Allison tells as superstitious, Max accidentally frees a coven of evil witches who used to live in the house. Now, with the help of a magical cat, the kids must steal the witch's book of spells to stop them from becoming immortal. We watched Hocus Pocus. This was the first time I had ever seen this movie. Funny enough, I saw Hocus Pocus 2 first.
Yep.
And so you had seen this, I'm sure, as a child multiple times.
Multiple times.
So once again, tell me about what are your feelings in association with this movie? What did you feel like as a kid watching it? What did it feel like to watch it as an adult?
Kid, I really loved it. I think as an adult, I was able to appreciate a little bit more. Because, like, yeah, there are some stuff that it's like modern language that you're kind of like, how do they know that? But for example, when they go
the witches you're talking about,
the witches,
some weird anachronistic
stuff. But like when it came to them singing, it made perfect sense rewatching this film.
It did?
Well, like remember, like in the beginning of the film when they're about to be hung, they start like singing in harmony before like she predicts what's going to happen.
Well, I just didn't know how they knew I put a spell on you. They changed the lyrics, but how did they know that tune?
Well, it was like they were hearing it and then they changed the lyrics to their life.
They're pretty fast. They're like comedy improv people who do music.
I mean, they're witches. What the fuck do you expect?
So this movie.
This movie.
Uh-huh.
What?
Why are you mocking?
I'm not mocking. I'm repeating.
So one of the things that I thought about while watching this movie was this feels like it's in the waning days of the pre-internet era. Like it feels modern enough, but just before AOL takes over.
Yeah.
And so it's this weird, like, end of an era kind of feeling a little bit.
Yes.
Because there's no cell phones. No one gets on a computer at any point, right?
No, and this is also a film that, strangely enough, even though it is under the Disney umbrella, when you really look at it, you're just like, this was not originally made by like the Disney folk.
It got pitched to Spielberg at Amblin first.
Yeah.
And he told I think it was Mick Garris and someone else who wrote the script. And Spielberg just said that he felt Disney would probably be able to do something with it. But I do think it kind of feels more like, one of those Spielberg movies where like kids say cuss words or something.
Yeah. It felt like one of those. Oh God, that reminds me. You are not probably gonna know about this film. It's like a Halloween film, and it had to do with the fact that they're like, oh, we need a virgin to read this verse, and they end up having a little girl read it. This is just like it's.
Could you be more specific?
I couldn't.
Is there a threat in the movie, and what is it?
It's like monsters being revived.
Monster Squad.
Yes, that one.
You were thinking I fucking fuck you. Fuck you. Saying, I don't know if you know. Do you know what my autistic fixation is, bitch? It's movies. But yeah, I've seen Monster. I saw it once.
Yeah, it felt within that realm of those type of movies where it's sort of like
where they kick the Wolfman in the balls.
Yeah, it's kind of like it is the Disney-fied version of what you would consider the Goonies.
They are like pulling back a little from letting it get too spicy.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
The fact we have Thora Birch as Little Danny, probably one of her earliest roles. I don't think it was her first, but it's way back there. Who catches her brother fondling a pillow.
He's just spooning it.
Yeah. And then she mentions, because Allison is the girl that he has a crush on at his school, who looks like she's 25. But I think she was 17. But she's one of those people from, there was that certain kind of woman in the 90s that looked like a supermodel.
Yeah, it had to do with like the fact that she had model as like features, but then her clothes were very like momish.
Well, she had the look. I think it was probably women with Scandinavian backgrounds. I feel like there was a lot of like Swedish, Norse, even if they weren't natively from there, but they were descended from there that were made models in the 90s. So at one point, Danny, to embarrass her brother Max, when they encounter Allison, says he says you have nice yabos, which one of the things that sticks out to me is, who the fuck is calling breasts yabos? Even as kids, boobs. Like, you say boobs.
You call them yabos, and you're just like, why would like a 14 or 15-year-old would be telling their 8-year-old?
That sounds like something an 80-year-old Jewish vaudeville comedian would call breasts as yabos. Max being a virgin is a key part of the plot.
Yeah.
And so what I found funny, and I didn't think any of this was egregious. It was just like, oh, it's kind of one of those movies that's in this limbo between, being a kid's movie, but being something a little more grown up.
Yeah.
But Vox, the online like media outlet or whatever, I found an article someone had written on there where they were just they hated this movie. And they had a whole section devoted how it's a movie that is creepy and at certain points hints at pedophilia. And I thought that was an absurd claim to make.
It's a weird thing because it feels more like you're just writing from memory than actually watching the film. Because there's like, after the initial whole he's a virgin thing, it's only mentioned like once or twice. It is not as hyper fixated as it was. It felt like you thought it was supposed to be.
Well, and then the thing that I always wonder about this is, where are these articles for movies about like with gratuitous violence? Because like, what do you think is worse for a kid to see? Hocus Pocus or like fucking Deadpool? Because I guarantee you, as a former elementary school teacher, there were a lot of 8 and 9-year-olds or younger who were watching Deadpool regularly. And I think that would probably have a much more harmful effect on them than watching fucking Hocus Pocus.
Yeah.
There is a scene, but then like before I get to that scene, there's tons of kids movies that have like adult jokes in them, like the fucking Shrek franchise.
Yeah.
But there is a scene where they are trying to get on a bus, and they ask the bus driver if he will help get them children.
So it's just like, what do you require? And they're
We
like,
require children. And he says, it might take me a few tries, but I think I can make it happen. And so the Vox writer was also acting like that was some sort of profane thing. I was like, when did Vox get bought by Focus on the Family? Like, what the fuck? But then that reminded me of another thing that I saw last week of Zoomers. When you poll them about what content they do not like to see in movies, sex and nudity is one of the highest things, not violence. And this is American Zoomers, right? And I think that's creepy and weird.
Yeah.
Because it's like, these people aren't actually fucking, you're not watching porn.
No.
This is simulated more often than not, especially right now. There's a lot of intimacy coordinators on set. People are not getting violated here. I mean, I'm sure if you're not comfortable with it, then don't watch it. But it's weird that like you would rather see people getting shot to death than people fucking. Like that's weird.
Yeah, it is.
But back to Hocus Pocus. Clearly the best part of the movie is Bette Midler. Like there's just not even she's very closely followed by Kathy and Jimmy.
Yeah.
And I think Sarah Jessica Parker is doing fine as well.
Yeah.
But it is Bette Midler is you'll either love the movie or you'll hate it based on her.
Yeah.
Tell me what you felt about, because there was a lot of laughter coming out of you during this viewing, particularly during Bette Midler line deliveries.
It's just she is like going all out, much like Raul Julia was like giving it all. You can tell she is having fucking fun during this. It is like it's so stupid because it's like this character was shown who's gone to hell, praises Satan, like has killed millions of children, is
maybe not millions,
like hundreds of kids, is really saddened when Danny calls her ugly. Like,
I was thinking of all the eye acting she's doing.
Oh yeah, like how wide her eyes.
Every time someone says something and she responds with like a question, she'll be like, "Children," and then like you can't see it because it's an audio podcast, but like eyebrows up, eyes wide.
Yeah.
She does that.
Eyelids are like completely gone.
And like each of the witches has a very specific physicality to them.
Yeah.
In like their face, in their body movements, and so it's clear that these three actresses spent a lot of time rehearsing and figuring out who these characters were going to be.
Yeah.
And also embracing the clownishness of them.
Yeah.
That these are both the antagonists, but also the comedy relief. Because no one else is that funny in the movie.
No, like, so Sarah Jessica Parker at times is hanging off of gates, just swinging if she isn't distracted by a young man. If she isn't like boys. Like and one of like my favorites is like when Billy reemerges and like so Winnie, which is Bette Midler's character, is just like, hey, go do my bidding. And Sarah's like, hi Billy. Just like she was the cause of his death, but she's still gonna flirt with him.
What do you think of Kathy Najimy?
She was great. I loved when when Winnie is like weeping about the book and how they're like, oh, they're gonna die soon, and she's like, do you want to hit me? Will that make you feel better?
Well, and like she had kind of a stroke face. Yes. That was kind of the thing she was going for. But as I was watching it, I realized like, oh, this is kind of inspired by the Three Stooges.
Yeah.
With Winifred being like Mo, Mary is Curly, and then Sarah Jessica Parker's Sarah is, I guess, Larry by default because that's just who's left. Yeah. But there was very clearly like Mary was kind of the big dumb one.
Happy, like Winnie is,
and then Winifred is clearly the leader, but even she is kind of dumb a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's not a complete homage to the Three Stooges, but I wouldn't be surprised if they watched some of that material, or like the Marx Brothers.
Yeah. This
sort of chaotic comedy. And as we said, they're like the best part of the movie. One of the things that I realized as being my first time watching the movie is it provides you with its own sequel
Yeah.
in the movie. We get to a point where the kids lure the witches into the kiln at the high school, and the witches are incinerated. We see them turn into a cloud. And to me, that's where the first movie would end, right?
Mhm.
But then we have a continuation where we start to explore what do we do with um Thackeray, the cat, now that he's still around, right?
Yeah, because they call him Binks.
Binks, yeah, this is Thackeray Binks. What do we do with Binks? What do we do with the Allison Max relationship? What happens to Billy, the resurrected former lover of Winifred and Sarah, played by Doug Jones? And so like before the witches die, Billy doesn't have any dialogue.
Yeah.
After the witches die, at some point he cuts the strings in his mouth and he talks for the first time. And all of these felt like beats and elements you would find in a sequel to Hocus Pocus.
Yeah, it felt as if they also understood that we have child actors. We would love to have a sequel, but it would be unfair if we already have a plan because then the child actor, like, especially like Danny, she could not reprise that role.
If you did it maybe like 2 years later, it wouldn't be too bad.
But like you would probably tell the difference of like
Well,
height and like
Well,
change.
she was 11
Yeah.
playing an 8-year-old,
Mhm.
and she was pulling it off. But I mean, I guess yeah, when she hit 13, maybe like puberty would have kicked in, and it would have been
Yeah.
obvious that she was like far older than the character.
Yeah.
Speaking of the child actors, let's talk about those. What did you think of the performances from Omri Katz, Vanessa Shaw, and Thora Birch in this movie?
I thought they were all pretty good. I think Thora Birch was the one that like kind of stole the show because like she could do like she had great reactions. She just couldn't cry for the fuck of it. Like,
Yeah, anytime she needed to be sad, it just didn't work.
no.
But she was the most, I think she was the more talented of the three child actors in that she was able to exhibit more of a range.
And there was a range that was expected of her. Unfortunately, the kid playing Max, there wasn't much that he could offer. And then like Allison was just supposed to be that smart, pretty girl.
She's a love interest kind of girl. So Omri Katz, Max Dennison. Previous to this, he had been on Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
He played J.R. Ewing's grandson. I know that because my grandmother watched Dallas religiously. But then the role most of people from our generation probably know him from is Erie, Indiana.
Yeah.
Were you an Erie, Indiana viewer as a kid?
No, I only saw like one episode, and I think it was like the first one. It's the kids that like live in the Tupperware.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one so many times. I wanted to be an Erie, Indiana viewer. But I was continually pissed off because it aired on NBC on Sundays, like around 6:30, I think.
Yeah.
And there was sports shit going on. I don't remember if it was World Series or football or what, but it constantly preempted it. So I never knew when it was airing. And so I never got to watch it. And then years later, I think Fox picked it up in syndication when I was in high school.
And it was like a little too late.
And by that time, like I was at an age where I watched it. I'm like, yeah, I just can't get out of this what I would have when I was like 10, 11, which was like the perfect age for a show like that. Yeah. And so, yeah, like when I see Omri Katz, I think of him from that. I checked up on him after watching this movie because I haven't seen him in anything, and he doesn't act anymore. He actually runs a cannabis business.
Yeah.
And he looks kind of old, I think, for being in his like late 40s. Mm-hmm. But he also hasn't been in Hollywood, so maybe he just doesn't have access to all the serums and Fountain of Youth potions.
Painting his face every day.
And then Vanessa Shaw, I felt like I had seen her in other things, and then I realized the one thing that I remembered her from was Eyes Wide Shut, which was 6 years later. So she was 17 here, so that's 23.
Yeah.
And I want to say she is this woman that Sidney Pollack's character, like she dies on his property from a drug overdose.
Okay.
And then he calls Tom Cruise over to like help him because he's not sure if she's dead or not. I want to say I think she dies, but that's what I remember her from.
Yeah.
But she's connected to the whole like secret society shit that happens. But yeah, those performances are, I mean, they're kid performances in a Disney movie.
Yeah.
I felt like every other supporting performance in this movie was completely forgettable.
Yeah, I mean, it was forgettable, but at the least, like, there wasn't any bad actors that stood out. Like,
Well, there is one highlight.
okay.
Gary and Penny Marshall.
Yeah.
That scene I actually did find pretty good.
But you were kind of weirded out by
They're
it.
playing like a husband and wife, which is
Yeah, which was weird.
but I could get over that. Because he's dressed up as the devil.
Yes.
And his the walkway to his house is lined with like pitchforks.
Mhm.
So they think they found where the devil lives.
Yes.
And so what makes the movie funny is that it's a fish out of water comedy.
Yes.
It's not that it's a scary, and that's the person in that Vox article was like, it's not funny enough to me to be a comedy, and it's not scary enough to be a horror movie. So what is it? And I'm like, it's a fish out of water story.
It's for children.
Yes. And it's the humor in the movie is we're taking these three people from centuries earlier, plopping them down in the modern world, and we're mining that for comedy.
Yeah.
Them not knowing what a bus is. Them mistaking someone saying one word for something else.
Them getting confused because they could smell children, but it turns out the children are all dressed up and they're kind of confused because they thought they were little goblins.
Exactly. But yeah, it's one thing that the person in the Vox article pointed out, and I did not know this about the movie. And it does make me think that maybe Disney didn't have a lot of confidence in this movie.
Okay.
It was the release date.
Okay.
July 16th,
Ooh,
1993.
That's not a good.
So they dropped the Halloween movie in July.
Yeah.
And did Nightmare Before Christmas come out the same year as this?
You would have to check.
Yes, 93. Both Disney movies. Nightmare Before Christmas, I want to check that release date because I think that was actually closer to the holiday. October 29th, 1993.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if they had made Hocus Pocus, they were going to release it for Halloween. Then Tim Burton, but I don't know, like Nightmare Before Christmas would have taken a long ass time to make.
Yeah, it's also this weird thing because Nightmare Before Christmas can also
It's a Christmas movie.
It's a Christmas movie and it can be a Halloween movie.
I would have put it out at Thanksgiving. But...
Yeah, they didn't have a lot of faith in it, but it makes me wonder, like, how much did it end up making? Because I feel like it was a fairly
It made
popular
$52 million in 1993, which I think is good box office for a movie. Like, let's see what was the budget, because I doubt the budget was that high. Though, I mean, Bette Midler, she's going to cost you a pretty penny to get in your movie. The budget was $28 million. So they didn't double their money, but they came fairly close.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like in the world of Hollywood, like bookkeeping, for something to count as a success, the amount of money it has to make over the budget, I think is a little bit absurd sometimes. And so maybe for Disney, it wasn't a huge success. Now let's see Nightmare Before Christmas. And I want to see how much money that made. Now, I think that probably cost more money, maybe. Not because of big names, but just because of production time. It made 18 million, smaller budget, made 107 million.
Yeah.
So I do think they bet on the right movie.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, that kind of budget for Hocus Pocus with a 52 million box office isn't bad. I mean, that's good.
Especially considering, like, it came out in July. What did you expect?
When I think of the sequel, what I realize is I don't remember anything.
I barely remember anything in the sequel.
I remember they're after the book. That's which is the same as this, and I think it's like teenage girls or something.
Teenage girls who are teenage witches, basically, and the book is attracted to them.
I just remembered, like, watching this. This felt like a movie you would see in a theater.
Yeah.
The sequel, what I remember about it is it felt like this is a like direct to DVD or Disney Channel movie.
Yeah, this is a streaming opportunity. And it was a streaming opportunity because it was towards the beginning of
Disney Plus. Yeah.
So they're trying their best about trying to get, the
Get
millennials
them member
to come in
berries.
and then not be like, hey guys, can you go make your children watch this for us? Thanks.
So Hocus Pocus or Addams Family Values?
Ooh, I think the stronger film, and I hate to say it, is Hocus Pocus. I love it, but when it comes to structure,
I think Hocus
Hocus
Pocus'
Pocus,
structure is better.
yeah, they're not missing a beat. You're not bored. You're never like, why is that in there?
I did get a little bored near the middle.
But like Addams Family, because of the whole camp thing and the absence of the kids, like with Debbie, because I was like, it makes me feel like there should have been more scenes with them and Debbie.
Because
Like,
I thought they were good together, yeah. I think the acting is stronger in Addams Family Values overall. I think everyone is perfectly cast in Addams Family Values. I think the witches are perfectly cast in Hocus Pocus. And I think Thora Birch is perfectly cast. Everyone else, you could have switched them out with someone else, and I would not have cared.
I mean, the thing is, like, at the least they deliver it with confidence. I like the fact that, for example, the parents, instead of being home, like giving candy and not believing the kids, the parents are at a party and they're trying to like have fun with everyone else. So they trust their kids to be able to take care of themselves, kind of thing. Like, but yeah, it's hard because it's like when we start stacking it up, they're almost equal.
I don't know. I think Raul Julia's. Oh, think about this. It'll never happen now.
Yeah.
But Raul Julia, Bette Midler double like Bill in a movie together. They're both Broadway musical actor backgrounds.
Be like when they're younger, because I don't know if I could.
Oh no, I think they would be like if it had been around this time in the 90s.
Yeah.
I would have watched the shit out of that movie. And I don't even know what that movie's about. But I'm like, Raul Julia, Bette Midler, that sounds like a good time, right? That sounds like two people who are great actors, who not just great actors, but great performers.
Yeah. Who don't take themselves too seriously, that aren't gonna be like, oh, you can't like direct me in that light, I'll look ugly.
Because she's going as hard as Winifred as he was going as hard as Gomez. Where they're like, I don't consider the movies I do to be throwaway. Every movie I do, I'm gonna put everything I have into it. Do you think a sequel was necessary for this movie?
No.
Do you think there should be another live action Addams Family movie?
No.
Yeah, I think you can't. I think both of these movies are so specific to the era they were made that if you make them now, it's a new thing. It has to be a new thing.
A new thing. Like the thing is, like, I'm not gonna say that it's an atrocious thing if they make a new Addams Family. It is just basically they're gonna have to find a way of making it unique and feel fresh, while also kind of like taking in those influences. But again,
like this, I'm not interested in watching an Addams Family movie that has smartphones in it.
Yeah,
like that just sounds dreadful to me. Like have some weird like Addams smartphone like specific thing. Like I'm not. That's just, I want movies like this to be set in the 90s, not out of nostalgia, but because I think when you start to add in because if you make a movie contemporarily, you have to put technology into it. These things are so ubiquitous; they're a part of our lives.
Yeah.
But I also think having those things in a movie like this ruins the plot because it's like, oh, well, I have a cell phone. I can just call my friend for help.
Well, I think it just doesn't ruin the plot. I think to a certain degree, depending on who makes it, really can like date it.
Well, I mean, I'm sure people had the same feeling about, computers starting to show up in movies in general, right?
Like TikTok is mentioned in certain movies. You're just like, okay, great. I got it.
So yes. Of all the Halloween things we watched, what was your favorite Halloween thing? We watched Tales from the Far Side. We watched Chime. We watched Addams Family Values. We watched Hocus Pocus.
Addams Family. What was yours?
Chime.
Yeah, Chime was good.
I think Chime, it got me excited to watch Cure in December.
Yeah.
And it has me interested in exploring more of Kurosawa's film catalog.
Yeah.
Because I just thought, like, what a potent thing.
Yeah.
These movies, they were fun little nostalgia trips. It also makes me sad because I feel like when I see new comedies that are probably not too far off from these, but are contemporary, I just don't feel compelled to watch them. They just look like it seems a movie like this. I mean, I guess Hocus Pocus did end up on Disney Plus, but like the Addams Family movie, these are things like end up on Netflix now.
Yeah.
And they feel like it too. when they're made now, they feel cheaper than this.
Yeah, it's kind of like when we saw that movie that's on Netflix that's based on a book, like Max Has a Terrible Horrible Day.
Yeah. Alexander's Terrible Horrible No Good Day. That was released in the theater though.
Yeah, but it still became a huge Netflix thing. It's like Jennifer Gardner, all these like actors that you associate now with streaming.
Yeah. So I guess we have to have like a Halloweeny sign off, right? Well, boys and ghouls, I'm channeling my Crypt Keeper. Have a fright-filled Halloween. Well, that was the PopCult podcast Halloween Spooktacular for 2024. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check out our show notes for any important links, including to our website, popcult.blog. Make sure that you're subscribed to be notified when new episodes are up wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. Also, you can visit our website, popcult.blog, to see even more reviews. October has been our horror fest, and we're going to be wrapping that up this coming week with a review of Ken Russell's unhinged and amazing historical horror, The Devils, and the campy 80s horror flick Motel Hell. If you would like to support us on Patreon, we would love to have you. There are lots of reward levels to pick from and lots of things to unlock when you join. I want to thank our current patrons, Becca and Matt, who donate at the Writers Room level. That level, they get to pick a movie every month for me to watch and review. If you do that, you can also add your own thoughts to that review if you'd like. There are patron-exclusive podcasts that you get access to. We're currently doing a series called Love at First Laugh, which is about romantic comedies all the way back to His Girl Friday up to 500 Days of Summer. We've got 2 episodes of that banked with more coming. The next episode of our regular Pop Cult podcast is going to feature a horror movie with a lot of buzz around it, The Substance, as well as an independent film that piqued my interest about a girl going on a camping trip with her dad called Good One. Well, until next time, you keep listening, we'll keep watching. Our podcast music was provided by thepodcasthost.com and Alitu, the podcast maker. Find your own free podcast music over at thepodcasthost.com/free music.